Welcome to today's session regarding the use of WECApro for tracking state testing, student participation in testing events, and the recording of day of test results. This video will focus on managing the student information about testing after test sessions have been completed. There are a number of places in WECApro where information about state testing participation and completion can be viewed. The most complete section is accessed from the main menu at My SBAC and OAKS. When you first click that, you are asked to make a decision about whether you want to work with the scheduling and assigning of students or with the results of students. For information about scheduling, look at state testing video number 1. We're going to talk today about managing results. When you select results from this particular pathway, you are first presented with a list of all the active students in the school and the current status of their SBAC and or OAKS testing for this year. I'll quickly point out that on this screen, which is filterable in a number of different ways, but primarily is designed to show you what is the status as far as whether or not the student is supposed to take certain tests during this year and whether they have completed the test during this year. In each case, for each student, there are 2 lines. The top line indicates by checkbox which tests are required to be taken in the 15-16 school year, and this will update each year. And the second line is an indication of which tests have been completed for the 15-16 school year. Now, this data on the second line here will reset itself each year as a new testing season approaches, as will the mark as to whether the current year testing is complete. If you have administrative privileges for editing testing requirements, then it is from this screen that you can select the requirements that are necessary by clicking here on the button that says Set Requirements. When you have the right privilege and you click this button, you see a pop-up screen that will show you both lines again in a little more expanded view, which is editable so that it is possible to adjust by your administrative privilege which are the required tests. And once that's done for a student for the year, then that line will reflect that information in this top line. As students complete the tests, people administering the test or an administrator reviewing the results can mark which tests have been completed. Now, there are tabs here for seeing students based on whether or not you have them assigned to you as a test proctor, or whether or not they are your students. Or in this third case here, you can edit all the OAKS and SBAC tests and graduation essential skills information. I'm going to look at my Proctor List, and you'll see that you see a list that is very similar to what you saw on the first screen. The difference being that the only students who will appear on here are students for whom you have been assigned as a test proctor. Now, there are 2 ways in which you will see them, and that is if you have been assigned as their proctor for all tests, or if they have been assigned to one of your scheduled dates to be a proctor. In this case, there is a second tab that will show you the dates that you have some assignment as a proctor. And when you click on that date, what will appear then is the results of those students for that specific date. Now, what you see here now is a record, this record right here, which is a single record for that testing date for that student. It's possible, for instance, that Yogi has been in several testing sessions, but this particular one is the one that took place on Friday, February 12th of 2016. And it is from this level that as he completes a test, it is possible to enter the status of that test at the end of the testing period. Now, there is a progress tab for my students, which looks very much like the first tab, but in order for a student to appear here, you have to be assigned as their teacher. On the third tab over is the Edit Oaks and SBAC Graduation and Essential Skills. Now we have a search list or a find list for students. In this case, if you are the student's teacher, their name will appear here. If you are their counselor, your name will appear here. If you are the principal of the school, the names of all the students in your school will appear here. And this tab will show all the students in the high school. Keeping in mind, again, as with other places where this information is displayed, the students that are highlighted in blue here are students for whom you are a teacher, whereas other students are probably assigned to some other person. From this level, you can click on an individual student's name, and you can see at this first level all of the test dates that he has had any assignment. In other words, Yogi has been in a lot of tests here. If we want to look at the Oaks and SBAC scores detail for Yogi, click on this next tab, and you'll be able now to filter the tests by the year they were taken, in this case 15-16. And here you get the information about each test date and what happened on that test date, as well as the summary information of which tests are required and which tests are completed. Now, a technical note here that might help you understand this a little better is that these are individual records about test dates. And you see information here, so there can be many individual records about test dates for Yogi. These fields reside on Yogi's student record, and there is only one value there, one field. It's on the student's record. So there are many test date records, but only one record that tracks whether or not he has taken these tests. So in this case, I can look at the information that's shown here, and I can tell that he has completed the language arts, and he has completed part of the math. So I can mark the parts here that are completed. So that another person looking at Yogi's data will know that he has completed these tests, but he now needs to complete the math test. It's also at this level that you can add a new random test date. In other words, you can add a testing record, and you will have to put in the date that it happened. This is if you are not scheduling in WECApro the test dates and assigning students to those test sessions. It's more or less the shorthand method of putting in information one record at a time for one student at a time. Now there is another tab here that's the ODE Accountability Warehouse information. This involves records that have been downloaded from the ODE Accountability Warehouse in Student Standard Staging by an administrator. And these records will display the official test scores that have been recorded with the state. This is, in fact, the data that the state will be using for analyzing Yogi's status, so to speak. It's also presented here so that as an administrator, a teacher, or a counselor charged with indicating whether or not Yogi's met his essential skills, you have access to see this information. So for instance, here's Yogi having taken the English Language Arts test and having scores here in reading and in writing that actually exceed the state standards. Surprising for Yogi, but I can see that he took those tests on 5/8 of 2015, so I can come down here, say that on 5/8 of 2015, 5/8 of 2015, guess I better get back there where it was. On 5/8 of 2015, he in fact completed via OAKS or SBAC. And I can fill in these requirements and they will be translated over to his permanent record. There's also a place here for recording ELPA scores that will show up from the pop-up. Anytime you see the edit score screen here by a specific date, clicking on that will bring up information to edit the specific scores for that particular date. So if I go back to Progress for All Students, once Yogi has completed everything, and of course Yogi has not, then this checkbox which marks his current year as complete can be checked. Now all this information is available in a number of places. So for instance, from My Students, for instance, if I go into Yogi Bear's records and I come over here to testing, I see essentially the same information about the Smarter Balance tests right here, which are all of the test dates that he's taken and what percentage of completion he has for the current school year. And this is on the same set of data where I can look at MAP scores and the CPPA scores and so forth. I can also, from the student records page, look at the SBAC required list here and go to the WECA SBAC history and see essentially the same kind of information here that I saw on those other screens, except here I have all the students lined up. In this case, I can see all of the tests that were taken in the 2015 school year or 2016 school year, and I can see what percentage is complete at this point, and I can see whether or not they've opted out, if a student has opted out for the test. And once again, over here, I can see which tests are required and which tests are complete. That's a brief tour through where all that data is located. As usual, if you have questions about this, don't hesitate to send me an email or contact me by text message.